Yeah, good morning again, and good evening to those of you who are in a different time zone. So this is kind of related session to what we had yesterday about the model library. So this is about the model language. And yeah, I prepared a few slides just to get the to lay out. But since it's a very similar group, I'll skip through it. So some of the slides are the same as yesterday. One thing that I should say is, so I've added some credits there because none of this has anything to do with me. I'm more, you know, wanting to ask those people who've already contributed, such as Arthur and Jochen, in particular, who came up with the concept of the model language, to kind of utilize the stuff that's already there and extend it based on, well, our user input and based on, what we might think could be useful. So I cannot give enough credit to people listed there and others, um, and say how little I had to do with this. So with that in mind, so you've seen the survey results. I won't go through them one by one. So it does seem that data analysis is a big bottleneck. It does seem that there is a demand for having models readily available and easier to use, um, and also some tutorials and instructions, and that's been a recurring theme. Um, and yeah, benefits are pretty much the same as yesterday. So reduced entry barrier for novice users, avoid reinventing things. We could have some validation if that was sort of centrally kind of controlled in a kind of democratic way. It would ascertain reproducibility and increase the fairness of the data. So, um, so just like I said yesterday, I think a lot of people, when they start with a new sample system, they start building a model more or less from scratch. If you do the same thing over and over again, of course, you will have some kind of library at the ready that you can change the parameters of, and then you reuse that code. And there's this kind of dilemma between ease of use with limitations in a GUI where you present the user with a limited number of options and have a fully flexible system, but which is harder to use. And I would say we kind of have both already in a lot of the software packages. So I should also remind everybody, I was hoping more people would come and just reiterate that, and also, we have managed to establish a little bit of standardization, mostly in the area of the file formats. Now we're looking at the models. As I said, Jochen and Arthur and Brian and so on, they've already worked on developing this model language, which is actually quite far developed as far as I can tell. And obviously there are other standardization areas such as samples and so on. So in terms of the file formats, Josh has shown that yesterday. I thought I'd show you a real kind of output file that we output in our automated data reduction at ISIS. So basically without any user interference, there's an algorithm in Mantil in this case, which extracts from the original Nexus file some information about the instrument, dates, the proposal number, but also some reduction information in terms of which transmission runs have been used, what normalization has been done, and also what kind of calls have been done to the software. And then you get the data in the sort of usual descriptive fashion at the bottom. So everything's got this hash. So one can easily either delete this manually or ask your software to ignore it if it doesn't load it. But I think most software does have the loaders. And I think it was mostly Brian who also enabled us to output the same format, but as a binary format, as a Nexus or HDF5 format, which you can now very easily view, for instance, in a web viewer. So this H5 website, you just drop it in, and you have access to the contents of the data. You can do that for reduced data, and of course, you can also do it with the raw data, and you get a nice plot. So that's already there, and people perhaps don't have to be quite so scared of binary files because there are these very easy to use tools. So now we're coming to the model language. So this is, as I said, can't say enough, mostly invented by Jochen and Arthur with the implementation, and Arthur will give you lots of examples when he joins us. So this is just lifted off the ORSO website, what the aims were, to aid with experiment planning, to have a self-contained repeativity file, to be able, when the data analysis package loads it, to also display the model alongside the data. It's really nice in that you can have a very simple model description where you really convey just the minimum amount of information about your sample, but also you can then go into more detail and sort of unroll certain things. You can name things and then have a descriptor further down, and there's a hierarchy and all this. So the idea would be that this would be then inserted, ideally in some kind of semi-automated fashion. So the instrument scientist or the user would put it in the data reduction workflow as a kind of generic thing, perhaps, and then it would be inserted into the ORSO file, and it would be both human and machine readable. Andrew Nelson, I also, kind of emphasize, how much he has done in this area. He keeps adding features to RefNX to make use of this infrastructure. So you can correct me if I'm wrong. So there are model conversion tools, so you can read in a model. You can also output a model according to the ORSO file standard, and also you can drag and drop now. That's very recent. Ort file onto the RefNX GUI, and it would come up with your data and your model. So where do we go from here? So I'm unfortunately, have a sort of simple mind, and I like things simple, and a lot of time I get confused about lots of text and code, and I find it's easy to make mistakes. So I'm sure all of you will have seen this Scratch interface, which is for children or teaching or whatever, where you learn to code by dragging and dropping these code blocks. And I'm wondering whether it's not possible to do something similar. So going to help, this is the stuff that I'm often interested in. These sort of bilayer systems, they've cropped up over and over again, but it can be anything, any model that that you want. And the question is, why can't we have something where you have these building blocks and you draw it just like I have this very rudimentary PowerPoint drawing here. Just add the blocks on top of each other, and then by some computer magic, your model pops out. And now some of you may say, well, yes, but this might be very specific and restrictive, and it's true. However, I would put forward for discussion later that it is restrictive, so you have to define some envelope, but it can still be generic within that sort of category of model. So you can have different different types of lipids, different proteins, different order of layers, and so on. Since this model language, I don't know why it's still called simple, because it's actually not that simple. It's actually pretty um, you know, complex and flexible and powerful. Yeah, and we can then have reproducible behavior like we talked about yesterday. Oops. So yeah, so in my, again, very simple mind, OrsoPy could provide this kind of model syntax, which we partially already have. It would provide some input parameters to pass to a class, and then the actual implementation of delivering the model would have to happen, of course, in the specific fitting software package. But it wouldn't have to be done in the same way. It could be done in the way that language does it, and it's the output, the physical description of the model that matters. So same model, I just turn it upside down, because usually the neutrons come from above, or often they come from above, whatever. So the really my thinking is the following, or my question, my challenge, the gauntlet to everyone is: what is the minimum required information that we can pass to a machine and it still build us a functioning model? So in my mind, you kind of, for this system, you need something like, the standard materials in your standard layers. You need the bilayer composition, so which lipids were used, in which proportion, and so on and so forth. And then in the case of the protein or its structure, or a kind of general SLD or any other information. It could be a peptide, it could be a polymer, whatever. And then, of course, to build a model, you need some other, boring stuff like scale factors, backgrounds, limits. You need the layer parameters. So each layer obviously has to have a thickness, SLD, and roughness. The bilayer, depending on how you define it, can have this area per molecule description, certain parameters, or if you have the compositional modeling, there will be some parameters there that you have. But nonetheless, the implementation is not so important. It's still, what lipids have I got? And all the rest could come out automatically. So again, Jochen, you can see he's worked on this a lot. So he has a relatively straightforward description, where you have your substrate, you define a film, and then water, and then you define what these names mean: the substrate, the film, and so on. And you define materials, you define layers, and so on and so forth. And the question is, can we simplify that further? For instance, by defining your stack, and then you only define what you actually need. So the simple elements are interpreted as such, as simple layers, and then other names need to be explained. Or indeed, do it even simpler. So you have same again, but really you have a kind of model class, and you only have to tell it, what the inner and the outer leaflets consist of. And then eventually it will build a model where it provides you with all the parameters that are required to input into that model to generate that model. So as I said, many of these things already exist. So Refnex has this lipid leaflet construct, which is really quite nice to use and encapsulates a lot of this. There's obviously mole groups. Frank Heinrich talked about it. We have the SLD database. We have the lipid browser in Refnex, which I frequently use. And of course, we have lots and lots of private implementations, which hopefully we might capture in the model library. So yeah, so that could help us to to automate the whole process of data analysis to a point. So I think people mentioned earlier about ChatGPT being good at this. This was some time ago, perhaps a year or two ago. So ChatGPT was still quite new then. And if you look at my prompt, um, this was a project. It's not actually published, and yeah, it generated this code. And to the ones of you who are familiar with RefNX, you will notice that this is not quite what would compile. So, but I think it's nearly there. Anyway, so that's um, that's what I had to say. And yeah, as I said, I would like to see what we can do and how much can we simplify it, and look at it in a kind of 80-20 approach. So if we can make some model categories which capture, 80% of the cases, then why not do that? And then if it goes beyond that, then you still have to work harder to get there. So yeah, that's it.